That night, I just clicked the news channel. My daughter-in-law threw the remote at my temple and snarled, "Turn it off, old lady." My son sat still. I stood up, wiped the small streak of blood from my forehead, and opened an old drawer to get the key to a safe locked for 28 years. Inside was a secret big enough to change their whole neighborhood and their fate. My name is Beatrice Nolan. I am 62 years old, a widow. For most of my life, I was the community treasurer for our church and a part-time accountant. I am a white American woman who understands ledgers, balance sheets, and the precise, unfeeling language of contracts. The townhouse here in Portland, Maine, was dark, pressed in by the January cold rolling off the harbor. The only light in the living room came from the flickering news broadcast I was quietly watching. From the kitchen, the heavy smell of baked cod lingered, an oily reminder of a dinner I hadn't been invited to share. This was their house, Lydia and Evan's. I was just living in it. The assault was sudden, a black rectangle flashing past my eyes. The remote control struck my temple, hard. The pain was sharp, a sudden crack against the bone. "Turn it off, old lady," Lydia hissed, her voice tight with a familiar, casual malice. I looked at my son. Evan sat on the sofa opposite me, bathed in the blue light of his phone. He didn't flinch. He didn't look at me. He just sighed, as if I were the inconvenience, raised his own phone, and turned the television's volume up. The anchor's voice boomed, a meaningless drone designed to cover the silence of his betrayal. I sat there, stunned. The room felt suddenly frigid. The electric baseboard heater beneath the window let out a low, metallic groan, failing to fight the draft. I slowly raised my fingers to my head. They came back wet. A thin, dark smear of blood glistened on my fingertips. It was a small cut, but it was there. This bright, cold room, the one I had helped them secure, was not a home. Lydia wasn't finished. "You just sit there," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Taking up space. You don't even contribute to the rent, but you think you can just watch whatever you want." I said nothing. My silence has always been my shield, but tonight, it felt different. It felt like a weapon being sharpened. My eyes drifted from her angry, pinched face to the small bookshelf by the door. A cluster of keys hung there on a brass hook, keys to the mailbox, the shed, and among them, one I recognized instantly, an old, tarnished key I'd put there myself, thinking it was hidden in plain sight. A memory flashed, quick and clear, cutting through the shock. 28 years ago, my husband, Martin, and I, signing papers in a stuffy law office. We were establishing the Harbour Light Trust, a limited liability company designed to hold the rights and, more importantly, the debt on several key waterfront properties. A secret we kept, a foundation we built. The silence in the room was finally broken by Evan. He looked up, not at me, but at the space between us. "Mum, just let it go," he said, his voice flat and tired. "Don't make a big deal out of it." His apathy, his casual dismissal of the blood on my temple. That was the real blow. That silence from my own son hurt more than the plastic object his wife had thrown. That was the moment the last thread holding me to this version of my life snapped. I stood up slowly, my joints aching. I didn't wipe the blood again. I let it be. I walked past them, past Evan's lowered gaze and Lydia's triumphant sneer. I went to my small bedroom, the one they called the den, and I turned the lock on the door. The click sounded final, loud in the quiet house. I didn't turn on the light. I went to the old wooden desk Martin had built, the only piece of furniture in this house that was truly mine. The bottom right drawer looked stuck, just a piece of badly made furniture. It wasn't. I pressed a specific knot on the inside panel, and a false back clicked open, revealing a shallow, hidden compartment. Inside, just two things lay on the worn velvet lining: a single, heavy key for a bank's safe deposit box, and beside it, a thick manila envelope, sealed not with glue, but with the dark red wax stamp of our attorney's office. I would leave in the morning. I would pack one small bag and walk out that front door before they woke up. But I wasn't running away. I wasn't retreating. I was going to pull the pin. I spent 12 years as an accountant for a small, local trust in Portland. I wasn't a high-powered executive. I was the quiet woman who balanced the ledgers, the one who actually read the covenants and addendums. I understand amortization schedules. I understand due dates, default notices, and the cold, unfeeling power of a priority lien. Lydia saw a dependent, an old woman taking up space. She never saw the woman who had managed the books for half the waterfront properties in this city. My husband, Martin, was a quiet man. While other men in the 1980s were buying boats or vacation homes, Martin was quietly collecting distressed mortgage bonds on the old harbour neighbourhood. He didn't buy the properties. He bought the debt. He bundled them, secured them, and tucked them away inside Harbourlight Holdings, LLC. When he died, everyone, including our son Evan, assumed his holdings were just a small retirement fund. They were wrong. I was his sole heir and the successor trustee. The original, notarized papers, the physical shares, were all in that safe deposit box. The key I'd retrieved from the drawer was now in my pocket. I spent that first night in a cheap motel by the interstate, the one with the flickering vacancy sign. At dawn, I didn't go to the bank yet. I went to the county registry of deeds. I needed to confirm one thing before I opened that box. It was all there, filed in 1992. The townhouse Evan and Lydia lived in, the one they paid rent on, wasn't truly owned by the landlord they sent checks to. The entire street, Harbourview Row, was part of a complex, long-term land trust. And Harbourlight Holdings, we held the primary option to buy back the entire block for a price set 3 decades ago. But Martin had been smarter than that. We also held the consolidated debt notes for all capital repairs and improvements made to the row. The landlord they knew was just another holding company, and that company owed us money. I remembered, with sudden clarity, a fight from 2 years ago. Lydia, all false sweetness, pushing Evan to ask me to co-sign for a new set of credit cards. Just to build our credit. B, she had chirped, as if I hadn't seen the 5-figure limits and the 24% interest rates. I had refused, gently but firmly. I told Evan it was poor financial planning. He'd looked embarrassed, but Lydia's smile had turned to ice. That was the day I stopped being mom and started being the old lady. That was the root of the hatred. And her job. This marketing consultant position at a company I'd never heard of. Northwind Analytics. It always sounded vague. She spoke of clients and contracts, but I'd seen the unmarked vans that came late at night, the sheer volume of packages. She was running some kind of business from that house, and I knew it wasn't just marketing. At 10 a.m., I walked into the offices of Kendrick and Vale, LLP. I hadn't been inside since Martin's will was executed. Marla Vale, the daughter of the original partner, met me. She was sharp, professional, and didn't waste time on sentiment. I didn't need to. I placed the safe deposit key on her polished mahogany desk. "I need the contents of Box 345 at the First Portland Bank," I said. "And then I need you to review them, immediately." By 3 p.m., we were in a conference room overlooking the grey water of the harbour. The contents of the box were spread out: notarized certificates, asset ledgers, and a very specific schedule of overdue interest payments from the holding company that nominally owned Harbourview Row. Marla read the trust covenants, her pen tapping a quiet rhythm on the table. "Beatrice, this is ironclad," she said, her voice quiet with professional appreciation. "The rental agreements for Harbourview Row," I said, my voice steady. She found the file. "The land trust has strict covenants, enforced by the primary lien holder. That's you. No commercial operations from a residential zoned property. No subleasing without written approval." "And if the audit finds fraud," I asked, "or unauthorized commercial use?" Marla Vale looked up, allowing herself a small, thin smile. "If it finds unauthorized use, Harbourlight has the right to activate the acceleration clause on the improvement loan. The full amount comes due. If they can't pay, and based on this, they can't, you can begin foreclosure proceedings." I wasn't ready to take their home. Not yet. I just needed them to understand. "I want to start the audit," I said. "They'll know it's you," Marla cautioned. "Your son." "No," I said. "Harbourlight Holdings is an anonymous LLC registered in Delaware, managed from Portland. You are its legal representative. My name is not to appear on any communication. I am simply a concerned investor." I signed the limited power of attorney. Marla Vale would be the face of the trust. I, Beatrice Nolan, the old lady, the burden, would officially cease to exist. The first move was not a cannon shot, it was a paper cut. Marla Vale, acting as counsel for Harbourlight Holdings, sent a sterilized formal notice to every tenant of Harbourview Row. It was a standard, legally mandated audit of utility usage and lease compliance. Their landlord, the holding company, received a copy, as did Evan and Lydia, addressed simply to current resident. My name was nowhere on it. The reports came back to Marla's office within 3 days. The first thread was exactly what I suspected. A quiet search on the short-term rental platforms revealed the attic room of their townhouse listed as a charming harbour loft, complete with 5-star reviews. Lydia was subletting it, pocketing undeclared cash, a clear violation of the lease. But the utility reports told a deeper story. While the rest of the row had predictable residential patterns, their address showed massive spikes in electricity consumption between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. Furthermore, their internet bill, which Marla had subpoenaed, was not a residential package. It was a high-speed, business-grade fibre optic line with a static IP address, the kind one needs to run servers, not to stream movies. I took the bus downtown, wearing a simple cloth coat Lydia had once called depressing. I walked into the city tax office and used the public terminal to search the business license database. It took less than 5 minutes. There it was, Lydia Whitfield Consulting, registered at their address. That was the name she used for her role at Northwind Analytics. She hadn't just registered a home office, she had registered a commercial enterprise. I took the printout to Marla. She cross-referenced it with the original trust covenants. "This is the kill shot. Beatrice," she said, her voice flat. "The covenant explicitly forbids the operation of a direct-to-client or data processing business from a residential zoned property. It compromises the trust's insurance and zoning." The first official warning went out the next day. It was sent via courier, requiring a signature. Notice of violation. First incident. It cited the unauthorized sublet of the attic space and the operation of an unlicensed commercial entity. It included a formal demand for the immediate cessation of both activities. And, to add the first sting of financial reality, it included an invoice for $540, the retroactive insurance surcharge the trust had incurred due to her undeclared business. My phone rang that evening. It was Evan. His voice was pleading, the way it got when he was trying to manage one of Lydia's moods. "Mum, what is this? This audit. It's you. Isn't it, please? Mum, don't be difficult. Lydia is going crazy. She says the landlord is targeting us because of you." I listened to the wind whistle outside my motel room window. "Hello, Evan?" I said, my voice calm. "I am not involved in your rental agreement. You need to speak to the landlord's representation. I believe her name is Marla Vale." "Mom, please just call them off." "I cannot help you." "Evan," I said, and I hung up. 30 minutes later, Marla forwarded me an email Lydia had sent, addressed to the anonymous cowards at Harbourlight Holdings. It was a masterpiece of narcissistic rage. She called the audit a senile, controlling power trip, and a pathetic attempt to harass a successful businesswoman. She insinuated I had put them up to it. She ended it with a flourish. "You and that controlling old woman can go to hell." Marla simply replied, "This correspondence is noted. The 14-day deadline to cure the violations or face further legal action remains firm." I closed my laptop. My hands were steady. That same afternoon, I had used a small portion of Martin's liquid assets to make an anonymous donation to the Seafront Shelter, a local non-profit for the homeless. I had tasked them, through Marla, with a very specific community outreach project, the details of which were still being finalized. It was a separate piece on the chessboard, one Evan and Lydia couldn't see. That night, in the new, clean notebook I had bought at the pharmacy, I wrote the first entry. Day 1. No emotional responses, only procedure. The first thread has been pulled. With the audit in progress, Marla's legal requests had teeth. She gained subpoena power over the financial records connected to the property. The first documents to arrive were the credit card statements tied to the address. Lydia, it turned out, was living a life funded by pure fantasy. Charges from high-end restaurants I'd only read about. Online purchases for luxury handbags I couldn't even pronounce. And, most damningly, a monthly payment plan for a brand new electric car. A car she had parked in the spot I used to use, claiming it was a company perk. The real sickness, however, was in the next file. Evan. He had, 6 months prior, taken out a $20,000 consumer loan from a high-interest lender, the kind of loan with a 29% APR that bleeds you dry. The statements showed all of it, every penny, transferred directly into Lydia's business account to cover expenses while she got her agency off the ground. He was secretly bankrupting himself to finance her delusions, all while she complained I wasn't contributing to the rent. Then came the professional blowback. Northwind Analytics, the mysterious company she worked for, apparently had a data security clause in their contractor agreement, an agreement that forbade handling client data from an unsecured, non-commercial location. The moment Marla's official notice of violation was filed with the city, it became public record. Northwind's compliance department, likely in a panic, terminated her contract immediately, citing a material breach. The phone call from Evan was frantic. "Mum, they cut her off. Northwind cut her contract. She says you reported her. You ruined her job." "I reported nothing," I said, my voice as calm as the motel air conditioner's hum. A legal audit was filed. The results of that audit are public. If her partners had a problem with her illegal business setup, that is between her and them. Lydia, of course, saw it as a declaration of war. She took over the phone, her voice a venomous shriek. "You old bitch, you did this. You couldn't stand seeing me succeed. You're just a jealous old hag." I hung up the phone. 2 days later, the 14-day grace period expired. Marla sent the next notice via courier. Notice of violation. Second incident, failure to cure. It detailed their refusal to address the illegal sublet or the commercial operation. Tucked inside this envelope was a separate document, a draft proposal for rental adjustment. It was perfectly legal, citing the increased insurance and liability costs the trust was incurring due to their actions. The proposed new rent was to the dollar, exactly double what they were currently paying. It was a heavy, crushing number, but entirely defensible in court. Evan showed up at my motel, his face pale and haggard. He pleaded. He begged. He asked what he could do to make this stop. I looked at my son, a man hollowed out by his own weakness. "It is very simple. Evan," I said, not unkindly. "You have 3 things to do. 1, the sublet in the attic ends today. The tenant is out. 2, the home office, and all its equipment are dismantled and removed. The property returns to residential use only. 3, you and Lydia will enroll in the free debt management course offered by my old church. You will attend every Tuesday night. Those are the conditions to stop the eviction and negotiate the rent." He seemed relieved, hopeful even. "That's it. We can do that." He was wrong. He went home and presented the terms. I know what happened next because Lydia posted a 10-minute-long, tearful, furious video to her social media. She laughed. A high, sharp, ugly sound. She said she wouldn't be humbled by a senile old woman. She said she would rather burn the place to the ground than go to a pauper's church class. She refused every condition. I watched the video. Then I called Marla. "She refused?" I said. "I saw," Marla replied. "The video is compelling. I'm filing it as evidence of hostile tenancy." "Marla," I said, "that high electricity usage, the overloaded servers, the illegal, uninspected tenant in the attic. I'm concerned about the fire risk." "Ah," Marla said. "Of course. A safety inspection is absolutely warranted." The Portland Fire Department, responding to an anonymous but detailed complaint filed by the property's legal representation, arrived the next morning. They didn't need a warrant. The terms of the lease gave them access for safety checks. The report was filed by noon. The inspector found multiple, dangerously overloaded power strips in the attic, plugged into a single, non-grounded outlet. The wiring was hot to the touch. It was cited as an imminent fire hazard. That was it. The illegal sublet. The illegal business. And now, a documented, third-party citation for endangering the property and the neighborhood. The fuse was no longer just lit. The charge was at the door. We now had full, undeniable grounds to trigger the final clause recovery of the property. Before Marla filed the final eviction papers, I called Evan. I asked him to meet me at a small coffee shop on the pier, one that smelled of old wood and burnt coffee. He showed up, his eyes red-rimmed, his hands shaking. We sat by a window looking out at the grey, choppy water. I didn't touch my tea. "You heard it that night," I said. It wasn't a question. He flinched, his gaze dropping to the scarred table. "Mom, you heard her throw the remote. You heard her call me an old lady, and you turned the volume up." He finally looked at me. His face crumpled in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. "She was already so angry," he whispered, the admission tearing out of him. "About the Northwind contract, I was afraid she would explode. I didn't know what she'd do. I didn't know what to do." He had named his sin, not malice, just pure, paralyzing cowardice. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I reached into my purse, past the checkbook and the motel key, and pulled out a small, folded pamphlet. I slid it across the table. He unfolded it. The title was clear: Strength and Support for Families Living with Toxic Relationships. "I'm not the one you need to be protecting," I said quietly. The tears came then, silent and miserable, rolling down his unshaven cheeks. "Mom, please. I'll fix this. I'll talk to her. We can fix this." I pushed my untouched tea away. "Fixing it starts with you, Evan, not with her, not with me, with you. You have to decide which life you're living. But this arrangement is over." I stood up and left him there with the pamphlet. I had barely returned to my room when Marla called. "She's liquidating," Marla said, her voice crisp. "One of our neighbours on the row, the one with the ring camera, reported a consignment broker at the house. Lydia is trying to sell the high-end appliances and the custom furniture. The things the trust paid for in the capital improvement loan," I stated. "Exactly," Marla said. "She's trying to sell assets that are technically secured by the loan she's defaulting on. She's moving the money into a private account." "File the injunction," I said. "Immediately. Freeze all fixed assets on the property pending the audit's completion. She can't sell a single light bulb." There was a pause. "And Beatrice," Marla continued. "That neighbour, she sent more than a report. She sent a video file from 3 weeks ago. It's clear. It shows Lydia shoving you against the doorframe during an argument on the porch." My stomach tightened, but my voice remained flat. "Does the video show children?" "Yes. The neighbour's son is playing on the sidewalk in the background." "Then we will not be filing a criminal complaint for assault. I will not have that child called to testify. We will stick to the civil matter. This is about the lease. This is about the trust. It's cleaner." "Understood," Marla said, with what sounded like a note of respect. The injunction, served by a sheriff's deputy, must have been the final straw. Lydia found me. She didn't come to the motel. She found me at the public library, where I was reading the municipal zoning codes. She cornered me in the stacks, her face a mask of pale fury. "You," she hissed, her voice low and shaking. "You think you're so smart. You think you've won. I'm reading. Lydia, you're a guest," she spat, jabbing a finger at me. "You were always just a guest, a freeloader living in my house. You have no right to do any of this. I slowly closed the heavy book. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper, a photocopy. I handed it to her. "What is this?" she snapped. "That," I said, "is the signature page of the Harbourlight Holdings LLC operating agreement, and that is the asset schedule, the one that lists the Harbourview Row Land Trust and all associated debt." She read it. Her eyes scanned the page, then scanned it again, her brain struggling to connect the words. She looked at the signature block for the successor trustee. My name, Beatrice Nolan, was written there in clear, clean script. She looked up, her mouth slightly open. The colour drained from her face. She finally understood. I wasn't the guest. I wasn't the old lady. I was the owner. I was the bank. I was the one who held the paper on her entire life. The smirk she had worn for 5 years vanished, like a light being switched off. The silence in the library was absolute. I watched the realization turn to something else. Not defeat, not surrender. Her eyes narrowed. A cold, desperate calculation flickered to life. She was cornered. And I knew, in that moment, she was going to play one last, destructive hand. While Lydia was plotting her next move, I was moving pieces she couldn't see. The anonymous donation to the seafront shelter had been put to work. As of that week, they began offering a hot dinner service 2 evenings a week, right in the community hall by the pier. The project was launched, as per my instructions, in the name of the long-term harbour community. Simultaneously, Marla, on behalf of Harbourlight, sent a new letter to the residents of Harbourview Row. This one wasn't a warning. It was an offer. In light of the recent safety concerns at one property, Harbourlight Holdings was offering a free, no-fault electrical inspection and basic upgrade service to every single unit, at the trust's expense. The response was immediate and positive. People who had been wary of the anonymous LLC now saw it fixing potential dangers. A week later, Marla held a tenants' meeting in the same community hall right after the seafront shelter's dinner service. I did not attend. Marla later told me the room was full. She announced new, clear community standards. All illegal sublets must be terminated, for the safety and insurance of all. But, in the next breath, she announced a new program, a rental cap and leaseback option for verified long-term residents, specifically prioritizing the dock workers, nurses, and teachers who made up the neighborhood's core. The first person to benefit was the young man who had been renting Lydia's attic. A volunteer from Seafront Shelter, funded by my grant, had contacted him. They explained his illegal tenancy, the fire hazard, and then offered him a legal, subsidized studio 2 streets over. He moved out the next day, grateful and relieved. Lydia, of course, exploded. She launched her digital offensive, a rambling, tear-soaked post on every community page, titled, "My abusive, senile mother-in-law is stealing my home." She painted herself as the victim of a vindictive old woman on a power trip, a successful entrepreneur being crushed by a jealous family member. But the ground had shifted. The community she was appealing to had just received free electrical checks. They had been offered stable rent. They had seen the fire trucks. The replies to her post were not supportive. They were factual. "Weren't you the one running an illegal business?" One person wrote. "My brother lost his apartment because of illegal sublets like yours," wrote another. "Harbourlight just fixed my wiring for free." Someone else posted. Her narrative was dead on arrival. In this storm, I received one quiet, separate piece of news. Evan had enrolled in the debt management class at the church. He had attended the first session alone. A few days later, Marla's audit of their finances noted a single, significant payment. Evan had liquidated a small retirement fund he had from an old job and paid off the entire $20,000 high-interest loan in one lump sum. It was the first responsible financial move he had made in years, with all other threads tied up. Marla sent the final communication. It was not a demand. It was a formal settlement offer. It was addressed to both Evan and Lydia. They had two choices. Option A: comply with all original terms, full cessation of all commercial activity. Provide proof of Evan's sole financial responsibility for the lease, and enter a 3-month probationary tenancy. Option B: terminate the lease, vacate the property within 21 days, and all legal actions regarding the violations would be dropped. Lydia's response was public. She went on a live stream, holding the legal document. This is what she thinks of her family. She shrieked to an audience of about 17 people. She then, with dramatic flair, tore the document to pieces. "We will not be bullied," she declared. No one cheered. The stream's comment section was silent. I watched a recording of it later, in my quiet motel room. I felt nothing but a cold sense of finality. I did not respond. I did not post a rebuttal. My rule was absolute: I would not argue online. My answers would only come on legal letterhead. The social pressure was now entirely on her. She had isolated herself, fact by fact, lie by lie. The neighbours she had once charmed now crossed the street to avoid her. The community she had tried to weaponize had turned its back. She was, finally, completely and utterly alone. I had stopped measuring time in days, but in legal filings. The next move came from the insurance company. Marla had dutifully forwarded them the fire department's report and the evidence of the undeclared commercial operation. The insurer, predictably, was horrified. They didn't just raise the premium. They retroactively applied a high-risk commercial surcharge for the entire period Lydia had been operating. Marla immediately passed this cost on. A new, formal letter was sent to Evan and Lydia. Demand for reimbursement of insurance surcharge. It totaled $3,200, payable immediately. It was another paper cut, this one deep enough to hit a nerve. But the financial detective work wasn't done. The neighbour who had provided the video footage mentioned something new: the sheer volume of packages. "It's not just Amazon," she'd told Marla. "It's freight deliveries, wooden crates." This was the detail I needed. I went back to the city's zoning ordinances. I found it in Section 4, Subsection B. The residential code for Harbourview Row strictly prohibited the receipt or processing of commercial freight. It wasn't just a home office. She was using it as a shipping hub for her agency. A single, anonymous tip to the city's zoning enforcement office was all it took. An inspector visited the property. He didn't even need to go inside. He just looked at the stack of shipping labels and commercial refuse by the side of the house. The city issued a formal citation for the zoning violation, which came with its own fine and a mandatory compliance hearing. Lydia's reaction was predictable. She posted another frantic video, this time claiming she was being set up by corrupt city officials working with her abusive mother-in-law. A local reporter, seeing the smoke, actually called me at the motel. Marla had given them my number, with my permission, for this exact moment. "Mrs. Nolan?" the reporter asked. "Do you have a response to Ms. Whitfield's claim that you are setting her up?" I paused. listening to the traffic outside. "I am a 62-year-old widow," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I believe in the rules. The city has zoning laws. The fire department has safety codes. The lease has covenants. The law is the law. It applies to everyone." I hung up. The citation must have terrified Evan. The neighbour reported seeing him in the attic, trying to dismantle the server racks and move boxes. But the report included Lydia, screaming at him from the doorway, physically blocking him from carrying a server out. She was not just refusing to comply. She was actively obstructing the cure. She was still convinced she could win a fight she had already lost. She must have known, on some level, that the walls were closing in. Marla received a call from another property manager in town, a man I knew from my church days. Lydia had applied for a luxury apartment. She had listed North Wind Analytics as her employer and provided a glowing reference letter. The property manager, being thorough, had called Northwind. They stated she was not an employee and had been terminated for cause. The reference letter was a forgery. He had not only denied her application, he had flagged her in the local rental association database. She was, in effect, locally blacklisted. That was the last piece. She had proven fraud, refused to cure violations, and endangered the property. Marla filed the final motion. With the settlement offer torn up and the violations proven, the judge signed the writ of possession immediately. Harbour Light Holdings had the legal right to recover the property. The official notice was posted on their door. They had 48 hours to vacate. Evan called me, his voice broken. He wasn't crying, just hollowed out. "Mum, I can't. 48 hours. I can't even move my clothes. Please, just a few more days." I was silent for a moment. 5 days, I said. "Thank you, Mom. God, thank you." "I am not finished," I interrupted, my voice cold and precise. "You will get 5 extra days if, and only if, you and Lydia both sign a stipulation. Marla has it ready. It's a legal promise that you will not commit any acts of violence, that you will not damage the property, and that you will not remove any fixed assets. If you do, you forfeit all deposits and face immediate criminal charges. If you both sign it and return it to Marla's office within the hour, the sheriff will wait 5 days." I heard him trying to explain this to Lydia in the background. Her response was not words. It was a sound, a high, guttural shriek of pure, undiluted rage. The boiling point had been reached. She had lost, and she finally knew it. The 5th day arrived with a storm. A bitter, driving northeaster swept in, lashing Harbourview Row with icy rain that felt like needles. I pulled my old wool coat tighter. I was not alone. Marla Vale stood beside me, holding a black umbrella that shuddered in the wind. A representative from the city's zoning office was also present, his clipboard tucked under his jacket, here to ensure the commercial violation was officially cured by the property being vacated. Lydia was waiting. She stood in the open doorway, framed by a hallway of empty, echoing rooms. A single, battered moving truck was parked at the curb, its hazard lights flashing in the grey deluge. "You're not welcome here, you old witch!" she screamed over the wind the moment she saw me. A box of what looked like packing peanuts flew from the doorway and exploded in a white, wet cloud on the lawn. "This is still my house for another hour." Evan was behind her, a ghost in his own life. He stood just inside the hall, his hands visibly shaking, his face ashen. He was just watching, paralyzed. The neighbors were watching too. I saw them, at least 3, standing on their own porches, phones held up. The neighbor who had provided the video before was filming again, her phone's light a small, steady eye in the gloom. Lydia was no longer performing for social media. She was performing for a live, local audience. "Ms. Whitfield," Marla said, her voice cutting through the rain. "We are here to take possession of the property at the agreed-upon time. The city representative is here to confirm compliance." Lydia laughed, a high, ragged sound. "Compliance. You want compliance." She snatched my old umbrella stand from the hall, the one I had brought from my house, and hurled it onto the porch, where it clattered and broke. "There's your compliance." She saw me pull my own phone from my pocket, just to check the time. Her eyes narrowed. "You're not filming me!" She shrieked, and she lunged. She lunged not at Marla, but at me. Her hands clawed, aiming to rip the phone from my hand. I didn't even have time to flinch. A body slammed between us. It was Evan. He had moved. Finally. He grabbed his wife by the wrists, pushing her back from me. His voice, when it came, was not a shout. It was a raw, broken sob that turned into a command. "Enough!" he roared, the word tearing out of him. "Lydia, enough, just enough." Lydia froze, stunned, staring at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. In that sudden, shocked silence, Marla stepped forward onto the porch, her heels clicking. She unfolded the final turnover document. "The legal handover must be read," she stated, as if this were a normal Tuesday. And in the driving rain, she read the legal description, the clause of possession, the confirmation of a final, clean break. She held the clipboard and a pen out to Lydia. "Sign here, confirming you have vacated and left the property in broom-clean condition, as stipulated." Lydia snatched the pen. She scribbled a jagged line on the paper, her whole body vibrating with a hatred that had nowhere else to go. "You'll pay for this," she muttered, the words almost lost to the wind. "Both of you. You'll pay." She threw the pen at the ground and stormed past Evan, shoving him hard against the doorframe. He didn't shove back. He just watched her. Then he did the hardest thing. He turned. Not to me, but to the neighbors. He turned to the city official. He looked at the phones still recording. He started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and spoke louder. "Over the storm. I am sorry. What happened here? I let it happen. I let my mother be humiliated in this house. That was my failure. I take full responsibility for it." He looked at me then, his eyes searching for something. Forgiveness. Absolution. A hug. I gave him nothing. I just looked at my son, the man who was finally, 20 years too late, standing on his own. I gave him a single, sharp nod. The new line was drawn. This was not a reunion. This was an acknowledgement. The moving truck's engine rumbled to life. Lydia didn't get in it. She climbed into her own sleek, new electric car, the one she could no longer afford, and peeled out from the curb, sending a sheet of grey water onto the sidewalk. The truck followed, its heavy diesel engine a mournful sound. They were gone. Marla and the city official did a quick, final walkthrough. I stood under the small roof of the porch, the rain dripping from the eaves. I reached into my pocket and my fingers closed around the new set of keys for the Harbourview properties. My hand was not shaking. Marla came back out, closing the door behind her. The sound of the lock clicking into place was definitive. A chapter, closed and sealed, by legal writ. The house on Harbourview Row was quiet for a week. I hired a professional cleaning crew first, to scrub away the lingering scent of anger and neglect. Then came the contractors. They didn't remodel, they repaired. They replaced every overloaded, scorched outlet. They tore out the illegal wiring in the attic. They installed new NFPA-compliant smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, hardwired into the house. They painted the walls, not in a fashionable grey, but in a clean, bright, durable white. 2 weeks after the eviction, Harbourlight Holdings, via Marla's office, posted a notice in the community hall. It announced a new priority harbour leasing programme for the newly renovated unit. Applications were being accepted, with preference given to night shift nurses from the local clinic and longshoremen from the port. The rent was listed, not at the high market rate, but at a stable, fair price tied to the area's median income. That same day, I met with the director of the seafront shelter. I sat with her as Beatrice Nolan, not as an anonymous donor. I signed a long-term pledge, directing a set portion of Harbourlight's annual profits to permanently fund their dinner program and their new housing assistance service. I heard about Evan through the grapevine of my old church, where he was still attending the debt counselling. He had not, as I half expected, run back to Lydia. He had moved into a small, furnished studio apartment above a garage, a single room on the other side of town. He'd gotten a job, a humbling one, working the night shift at a cold storage warehouse, loading frozen fish. He was using the entire paycheck to pay for his rent and to start, dollar by dollar, on the mountain of debt Lydia had left him with. He called me one Tuesday evening. His voice was hesitant, small. "Mom, I know you're busy. I just wondered if you'd let me buy you a cup of tea. Just to talk for a minute." I looked at the clock. "I can be at the Harbourview tea shop at 10 a.m. tomorrow," I said. "I have 30 minutes?" He was there early, already sitting at a small table. He looked exhausted, thinner, but his eyes were clear for the first time in years. He didn't hug me. He just stood up awkwardly when I arrived. We sat. He didn't plead. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for a single dollar. Instead, he pulled 2 things from his worn jacket. The first was a crumpled receipt from the debt consolidation company, showing the first $500 payment, made on time. The second was a small white card from a mental health clinic. It was an appointment reminder for his first session with a counsellor. He pushed them across the table. I just wanted you to see," he said, his voice quiet, "that I'm doing what I said." I looked at the receipt. I looked at the appointment card. I pushed them back toward him. "Good," I said, meeting his gaze. "Continue." I did not promise him dinner on Sunday. I did not say I loved him. I did not tell him it would all be okay. I just gave him the simple, hard currency of acknowledgement. He nodded, accepting the new terms of our relationship. Lydia, I heard, had posted one final epic-length exposé on her new, private social media account. It was full of accusations against me. Evan, Northwind Analytics, the city of Portland, and the entire concept of zoning laws. A friend from church, who had seen it, told me it had received exactly 3 likes before it vanished into the digital void. The wave had crashed, and the sea was now flat. I had moved from the motel into a small, clean apartment of my own, overlooking a park, not the harbour. That week, I did something I had not done in 40 years. I signed up for a class, a watercolour painting class at the community centre. My first painting was clumsy, the colours bleeding together. It was a picture of the harbour, not as it was, but as I remembered it after a storm. The water was dark, the sky was a bruised purple, but in the distance, on the row of houses, I had painted one small, steady, brightly lit window. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Marla Vale. It was not a conversation. It was just a file attachment. A new case. Beatrice, the email read. Another one of Martin's original liens is about to mature. It's the primary note on the commercial building downtown. The one where Northwind Analytics rents its main office. They're 30 days late on their quarterly payment. I thought you might want to review the file. The file Marla sent was a new opportunity, a loose thread I recognized immediately. Northwind Analytics, the company that had fired Lydia, was a tenant in another building Martin had secured a lien on, a large commercial property downtown. But this new file, this late payment notice, was for a different address. They were also leasing the basement of an old customs house, a property I also controlled, and the broker who had negotiated the lease on their behalf, a copy of whose signature was right on the addendum Lydia Whitfield. She had used her connection, before she was fired, to set them up in another space, violating zoning laws for a second time, likely taking a kickback for the referral. This time, my actions were immediate. I authorized a full compliance audit. The findings were worse than I imagined. They were running unshielded servers in a space that was not rated for that level of data processing, a clear fire and security risk. We didn't just notify the company, we notified the city's Data Security Commission. The blowback was instantaneous. Northwind Analytics, facing massive municipal fines and the public cancellation of their city contracts, panicked. They immediately agreed to every fine, every penalty, and every reform. Then, their chief operating officer requested an in-person meeting. He was a man half my age, impeccably dressed, who couldn't stop drumming his fingers on his expensive briefcase. "Mrs. Nolan?" he said, avoiding eye contact. "Your audit found compliance failures our internal team has missed for, frankly, years. The Lydia Whitfield issue was a significant oversight on our part." He paused. "Your understanding of municipal code, trust law, and financial compliance is, to be blunt, at a level we desperately need." He slid a contract across the table. It was an offer to become their senior compliance consultant. The salary offered was staggering. I looked at the number, then at the man. "I will accept," I said, my voice quiet. "On one non-negotiable condition. Northwind Analytics will immediately establish the Harbour Light Vocational Fund, a permanent scholarship for the children of the Portland port workers. Your company will fund it, fully, in perpetuity?" He looked, for a moment, like he wanted to argue. He looked at my face, and the argument died. "It's done," he said. I returned to my own apartment that evening. An email was waiting. It was from Evan. It was the shortest email I had ever received from him. "Mum, I've paid off 20% of the bad loan. I got my forklift certification today. I wanted to say thank you for not saving me with money." I closed the laptop. It was dark. I picked up the television remote. The plastic felt smooth in my hand. I clicked on the news channel. The anchor was discussing interest rates. I watched, undisturbed, for a whole minute. No one told me to turn it off. I set the remote down, exactly where I wanted it. I went to my desk, to the small safe I kept there. I opened it. It contained only one item of personal value, a single letter in Martin's hand, left for me to find after his death. It contained only one sentence. "You are strong enough to never have to prove it to anyone." I closed the safe. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Marla. "The Northwind payment cleared. The fund is active. And the final lien on the pier properties matured this afternoon. Harbourlight officially owns the entire pier. The stable housing program can be expanded." I put on my coat and walked. I walked back to Harbourview Row, just to look. The lights were on in my old unit. Through the window, I could see the new tenant, the nurse, sitting at the table, reading a book. She looked safe. She looked home. I stood for a moment on the porch, on the exact spot where I had stood in the driving rain, and I felt nothing. Not triumph, not anger, just the quiet satisfaction of a ledger balanced. It was never about revenge. It was about restoring order. My walk finished at the community hall. The room was full, hot, and loud with chatter for the monthly tenants' meeting. Marla was at the front. She saw me, smiled, and beckoned me forward. She handed me a pen and the final charter for the new Harbourlight Fair housing policy, the one the Northwind money had endowed, in front of the dock workers, the nurses, and the families of the harbour. I signed my name, Beatrice Nolan, locking the stable rents into place for the community. The room was silent. Then, a man in the back, a longshoreman I recognised from the pier, stood up. He began to clap, slowly. Then all at once, the room joined him. The sound was thick, a rolling wave of approval. The knot of my life had not been cut. It had been untied and rewoven into something stronger. This was what power was for. Not to humiliate, but to protect. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and like this video. And if you want to help this story reach more people, please hit that hype button to show your support.